Till now we have covered suppliers and consumers. In this video we will cover predicate. Now predicate is used to test the conditions, test the values. It basically returns a boolean value. So if we want to apply some test, we should use the predicate functional interface if we intend to use lambda expressions. Now, similar to suppliers and consumers, we have the generic predicate, which is simply predicate, then the primitive specialization of the predicates, int predicate, to apply the tests on integer values. If we have the long value, primitive long, then we would use long predicate. So generic predicate and int long double predicates, they work on the single value. Then there is by predicate, which basically accepts two values and does some boolean operations on that. So let's cover one by one and we'll see how to test conditions with predicates. So here is the predicate functional interface from the java.util.function package, and we see there is one abstract method test. It accepts a parameter of type T, which is a generic type. So if we are dealing with strings, then we would initiate a predicate of type string. Now, if there is a custom type, we would say predicate of type some custom type. Then there are a bunch of default methods and to perform the AND operations. First execute the given predicate and then the other predicate that we passed. So to perform the AND operation. Similarly, we have method to negate the condition. Whatever this predicate would result, the negate method would simply negate the output. If true, then false. If false, then true. Similarly, we have OR method where we pass another predicate and it simply checks the which predicate is true. If either of them is true, then it represents the true. Simple OR operation. Similarly, is equal to check two predicates. To check the equality, it returns a predicate that tests if two arguments are equal according to object.equals. So we can check the equality using the is equal method. Then there is not predicate. Okay. That is the negation of the supply predicate. So whatever predicate we pass to the not method, it will return the negation of that output. Now, given that we have this predicate functional interface, how do we use it along with the lambdas? So here we have the predicate demo class, and in the main method, we have two employee objects with ID 1 for both the objects and the name V and M. And then we have the test method in the demo class, which accepts a predicate of type employee. So we are using the generic predicate with employee type, and we are passing an employee object, the employee object that we want to test. Then we simply call the test method on the predicate interface, this test method, and we pass the employee object that we have passed. So as of now, we are simply calling the test method on the predicate, but we have not mentioned any condition that we want to test. That is something we are going to do with the help of lambdas. All right. So let's say we want to test, to start with a simple condition. Let's say we want to test if the employee's ID is 1. So if the employee's ID is 1, we expect the value true because the return type is boolean, otherwise false. How do we do that? So we call the test method. To avoid the confusion, let me rename this test method to test predicate or test condition, or maybe test employee, because we are dealing with the employee objects. Okay, so we will call the test employee, and we know that the first argument is a predicate, the condition in the form of lambda expression, and the second parameter is the employee object. So let's say we want to test the employee 1. So we will pass the employee 1. Now what we want to test is the condition that will be provided in the form of lambda expression. So we say that this is a predicate of type employee, so it will accept a parameter of type employee. We name it employee. Then in the body we say that we simply want to check if the ID of this employee is 1. So this is the condition that we want to test, and this is the lambda expression for that condition. It represents the predicate, and this is the value that we are passing, actual value that will be tested. So let's run the method. And we see the value true because the employee 1 has the ID 1. All right. So this is the simplest use of predicate, a simple condition. Now let's try to chain predicates together. So let's say now we want to say that return true if the employee ID is 1 and the name is V. What we can do is one way is to simply put the AND here. The second way would be to use the AND or these methods from the predicate to follow the functional programming. All right. So let's create one predicate of type employee and name it ID predicate. Because here we are checking the ID. If the ID is 1, then we will create another predicate and will name it name predicate, and we'll check the name dot equals M. Okay. Now let's chain them together. We are saying that check if the ID is 1 and check if the value or the name is M. So we are chaining two predicates, ID predicate to test the ID, name predicate to test the name. The conditions for ID and names are these. The ID must be 1 and the name must be M. But the employee that we are passing is employee 1, which has the ID 1 and name V. Now let's run the program. We see the value false because although this condition was true, this condition was not true because the employee 1 has the name V. Now if we just want to test other methods, we can test the OR on the same thing. Let's say that return true if the ID is 1 or name is M. So we can say achieve the same thing using the OR method. It basically represents the OR condition. Now we should expect the value true. Yes, because for employee 1, ID is 1, so this condition is true, and we are using OR name predicate, so either this must return true or name predicate. So because the EMP1 has the ID 1, ID predicate returns true, and we see the output true on the console. So we used the basic test and OR of the predicate functional interface. Similarly, if we simply want to negate the condition, we can use the negate. So what we can do is let's call it test employee ID predicate dot negate and then employee 1. So EMP1 ID predicate says that the ID is 1, which is true. So it negates the value to false, and so we see the output false. All right. So it basically negates, inverts the result. So this is predicate. Now, because we were dealing with employee, a custom object, so we used the generic predicate with the type of employee. But if we are dealing with primitive values, we would use the primitive specialization of the predicate. So let's say if we want to test some conditions on the integer values, so we will use int predicate. Let's name it int predicate, receives an input of type integer and simply checks if the input is greater than 0, or let's just say modulus 2 is equal to 0. So basically an even number. And let's call the int predicate with an integer value. So we see true in the end. For the last system.out.println, we see the value 2 because 6 is an even value, is an even number. Okay. So this is predicate and int predicate. Let's now move on to by predicate. So by predicate is mostly same. It has the AND method, OR method, negate method, test method. The only difference is it accepts two parameters. So instead of working on a single value, it accepts two values and it performs some Boolean operations on the two values. Okay. So let me remove everything here and let me initialize, create a by predicate. So we will say that the first argument is of type string, for example, and the second argument is of type employee. Okay. So str and emp parentheses, because now it accepts two arguments, and then the body. Okay. Now it's up to us what we want to do with these values. So because this is simply a demo, so we will use trivial conditions, some demo conditions. So all we say is if str dot equals emp dot name. Okay. And we call by predicate dot test. So we pass the value, one value to be v and second value to be emp1. So what we want to do is we are passing a value v and the second value emp1. So when this lambda executes, it checks that the emp, the name of the employee, is equal to the string value that we passed. So what we essentially are checking is that this employee 1 has the name v, which is the case for employee 1, the name is v, so the output must be true. So we see that true on the console. So that's something we can do with by predicate, where we deal with two values. We covered generic predicate, different ways to combine the conditions using predicate functions, and similarly by predicate to test two values.